Hello, this is Mayor Dan Rizzo, and I'm joined here today with Peter Brown from D'Ambrosio and Brown Law Firm here in the city of Revere, as well as Bob Marra, our new hearings officer for an ordinance that the city recently adopted under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40U. We wanted to bring our residents up to speed and up to date on what this means for them and what this means for the city of Revere. And I think to kick things off, I'll turn it over to Peter Brown from D'Ambrosio and Brown. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, as you know, this is an initiative that the city has put forth quite a while ago. Has been working with all of the departments, with my office as a consultant, to the city solicitor's office, with Mr. Marra serving as the city's hearing officer, to address the quality of life and public safety issues in the city regarding properties that are not keeping up with our public safety codes, with our building codes, the state sanitary code, and the City of Revere public safety ordinances. And so today is the official launch of the ordinance that you proposed and the City Council unanimously adopted for inspectors to go out and get the tools that they need to have a citywide system and infrastructure to go out and issue tickets for properties that are not living up to the standards that are required here in the city and all throughout the Commonwealth. So what is happening today is, for the first time in the city is public health inspectors are out there with automated ticketing devices, going out and looking at properties and examining properties where ordinances are being violated, and issuing tickets, notifying people to correct those violations, giving those tickets by placing them on the properties, and going through a automated system. An up-to-date and current system at inspectional services to try and address these properties. So it's pretty exciting stuff. The city is out there with these automated devices, is out there with a citywide system that's connecting inspectional services with the finance department of the city in one unified system that, in my experience and looking at all the other area municipalities that have this process and are doing very well with it, don't have that. And that's something that's very new and exciting, I think, not only for the city of Revere, but all throughout Massachusetts, as the city is really taking a leadership role in this.
Now, if I could just jump in for a second, we all began discussing this to start to address a lot of the problem properties that were in the city. Because as I have always said, you know, most people take care of their property, but there are those cases where either people are not in compliance with a health code violation or with a building code violation that in many cases can really impact the quality of life for that entire neighborhood. So I think it's important for people to know that we, as an administration, don't want to go out there and just look for people to ticket. We, you know, inspectors are out there to maintain order, and that's pretty much, you know, what any ordinance is there to do. So, but maybe you could talk about a little bit. Maybe Bob, I can actually turn this one over to you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how maybe it's been done in the past, and now going forward, what this is going to mean to the property owner in terms of, you know, geez, if I were to get a ticket on April 29th, how is that going to be different from getting a ticket on April 30th?
Right, that's a great question, Mr. Mayor, because the real value of this ordinance and the statutory process in the city compared to anything that we've done in the past is that it creates an efficiency within the system. In the past, inspectors were out citing people, writing tickets. That hasn't changed all that much. But once they wrote those tickets, the tickets kind of evaporated into the atmosphere. There was a right of appeal to the Chelsea District Court. With all respect to the Chelsea District Court, Peter knows this very well, a tremendously burdened inner city, quote-unquote, court that has many other responsibilities beyond how a municipality enforces certain safety code violations that may be considered minor within the stream of matters that flow across the bench in the Chelsea District Court. So appeals to the Chelsea District Court evaporated. Once a ticket was written, if somebody did nothing, there wasn't any real enforcement mechanism for the city to ultimately collect on fines that were issued. What the ordinances and what Chapter 40U does, and what the ordinances have adopted pursuant to that statute, is to create an in-house, if you will, system, a system that operates within the confines of the city of Revere. So inspectors who are out there may cite properties in violation of certain safety codes, building codes, zoning codes, and then if there's an appeal, that appeal process, instead of going to the Chelsea District Court, stays within the city of Revere, and that becomes my role. It's a role that you inquired about, you asked me about it, and I'm gracious to accept that kind of responsibility. And I take that role of the municipal hearings officer, and I become the determinant of whether or not the city has complied with its notification requirements, and then I determine whether or not a particular violation would be upheld or vacated. It takes it out of the Chelsea District Court. Now, after my decision, there still is a right of appeal to the Chelsea District Court, but we expect, and Peter could probably fill in with a little bit more statistical analysis, but most people who feel they've been aggrieved by a decision of an inspector will take that first step, but are far less likely to take the second step, where there becomes filing fees in the district court, which are not true of the local violation. So if you would compare it to a parking ticket, a person gets a parking ticket, they have a problem with it, they go to the parking clerk for an appeal. If the parking clerk upholds it, that usually spells the end of the appellate process. They feel they've had their say. So that's what will really be different about this new process, is the appeal, is the opportunity for citizens to appeal within the city. And I become really, although I am an appointee of the city, my role is really to be a completely objective observer of what the appeal what the appeal issue is. And it's my expectation that I will be holding the city to its very strict requirements of notification, of being able to prove by a preponderance of evidence that a violation did in fact exist. But then I will also have the opportunity to hear the appeals of citizens who feel they've been aggrieved. I think it needs to be very clear that this is not a mercy court where people are just going to come and give me a break. Yeah, we'll be fair to people, but the real objective of this entire scheme is to make people aware of the ordinances that are in place here in the city of Revere. And they're not ordinances to play kind of a getcha game for inspectional services to be able to find people, as you pointed out. It's really the purpose, its real purpose is for people to be aware that these ordinances exist, that these ordinances lead ultimately to the benefit of the city for everybody, by people complying with ordinances that have to do with safety and appearance and cleanliness and sanitary objectives. All the city benefits from that, and that's the real goal of this. Sometimes to achieve certain goals within the authority of the city or any municipality, you need to enforce rules that are in place. But once people become aware of rules, as you pointed out, they are far more likely to comply with them. And that's really what the objective of this is. We'd love to have a point where we aren't issuing any fines, where everybody's complying with all of these various ordinances. That might be a little bit idealistic, but that's ultimately the objective. This isn't an objective so that inspectors, the objective isn't for inspectors to be out writing tickets.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, the way that I've always looked at this since it was first being discussed back probably a couple years ago now, because we've taken measures above and beyond what other municipalities have with respect to adopting Chapter 40U, and maybe Peter, you might be able to talk about that. But this really, you know, it's an advantage for the city to be able to not have to kind of rely on Chelsea District Court to get to these violations and have to send our inspectors out there to testify and all this other stuff that just seem very, very labor intensive. But it's also helpful to the individual who got the ticket too, right? Because they don't want to be sitting out in limbo either. Bob is going to have hearings, I believe, twice a month, correct? And at least for now, twice a
The
month?
hearings, the statute requires that we hold hearings 2 evenings per month, so that people are not inconvenienced to have to break up their workday. The hearings are held 2 evenings per month, and our schedule of hearings will be on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. So violations that are written today, because today is day 1 of the program, violations that are written today that are appealed may very well be up for hearing on, I think the second Tuesday of May is May 12th. So we
So
will
that, Bob, so that in and of itself, to me, seems like an advantage to the person who's being issued the fine.
I agree.
They're able to take care of this and not have to wait and diary it out, 3 months or 6 months, or in the case of Chelsea District Court, unfortunately, because there's so much else going on there. I mean, it was going into the years that these cases would carry on. It became a little bit, very, very labor intensive, and it was hard for the city to manage. So maybe, Peter, you could talk about the way that Revere is doing it in a little bit different way than other municipalities might be.
Certainly. I'd like to add, though, I think one of the biggest complaints we heard when we first did this initiative was that residents didn't have the opportunity to timely raise their concerns and say, here's what happened a week ago and why I should not have gotten this ticket or shouldn't have gotten a ticket in this amount. And through no fault of the court is backlogged. And here, the people are going to file a timely appeal. They're going to raise their concerns, and if they have a legitimate defense and argument, they are going to present it to an independent and experienced attorney and mediator here, our hearings officer, and they're going to get a decision. And not a decision that somebody says you're right or you're wrong, but they're going to get a written decision that they're going to go and understand, and it's going to be based on evidence. And sometimes that property owner is going to win. Sometimes the city may win or may lose. But it's a process that is set up to be done timely and promptly, and it addresses one of those issues that I know we heard, and I heard repeatedly in inspectional services and from your constituent services in the mayor's office from neighbors. Now, mayors, to your particular question as to how Revere has gone above and beyond what both the state law requires and what other cities and towns have done, is that we have taken several years to put this up and running, but to really create something that works and that's going to stand the test of time and be able to grow as the times develop as well. And there are a number of things that the city's done. The most important is through the advocacy of your Director of Finance, Mr. Anzoni. He really advocated for a financially integrated system here. And what that means is that the ticket involves a financial charge that goes not to an individual but goes to a property. And if it goes through the appeal process and if a ticket is upheld, it eventually will make its way onto the property tax bill. And that's a very involved process that involves financial auditing requirements for the city, and it's also a very significant impact on the property owner. And previously, things were done because the law was set up in an unusual way from the state, that payments would come into the city clerk's office, even though the city clerk has nothing to do with code enforcement. And appeals would go through inspectional services. And then manual notices would be tracked, and things would eventually make their way over to the finance side. But they might make their way over to the finance side after somebody sold their house, or because of appeals pending with the court. And there was no real cohesive way to track everything and do everything. And you had a number of employees all throughout the city doing their very best to try and have a good system. But it was all manual. It wasn't integrated in any particular way. And what this system does is that it's financially integrated, where the financial software system in the city is speaking directly to the code enforcement system. So if somebody goes and wins an appeal and that ticket is dismissed, it is not going to go and affect their property. And it's going to happen instantaneously upon the decision by the municipal hearing officer. And that's very important. That's something that I'm not aware of any municipality that is done for you.
And conversely, when a violation is upheld, and if there is no further appeal from that violation, The integrated system allows that violation to be charged onto the tax bill. If it's never paid, it becomes a municipal lien. So from the city's perspective, these fines that are imposed will not just disappear. They will be there if they're not paid promptly. And for property owners who think they'll benefit by just ignoring it, that would be a mistake, because that fine not only will escalate because of it will accrue charges, but that fine will exist as a municipal lien. So when the time comes that someone wants to sell their property, the city will be in line, first in line, to collect on that fine. So this creates a very efficient and comprehensive process. And what you said is absolutely true. People will have prompt hearings, because I think the statute requires that the hearing be scheduled within 45 days, is it, of the notice. And my decision then must be issued within 21 days of the hearing. And the decision that I render is a written decision that will have full explanation of what process the city followed to impose the fine. It will have a summary of the evidence the city presents. It will include a summary of the evidence that the citizen, the property owner presents, and it will have, a synopsis of my analysis of it to uphold or dismiss. And what we find in general is that even when somebody might disagree with a conclusion, there tends to be a greater acceptance of a conclusion when it's explained to people. And this will be a hearings process, but it's, I emphasize, it's a very informal hearings process. It's quasi-judicial in nature, but the hearings are not bound by the rules of evidence that you would have in a courtroom, which you would have in the Chelsea District Court. So people will have the opportunity to present things to our hearings which may not be admissible in a court of law. And then it becomes my responsibility to give this type of evidence its proper weight. So my familiarity with the rules of evidence will help me to accord the appropriate attention to certain items, but people don't need to feel as if they need to appear with a lawyer, or that they need to follow some sort of very rigid rules. It's a very informal process that people should feel comfortable in, and that will be one of my objectives, is that these hearings are not imposing upon people, or they're not a daunting hearings process. They will take place at the police station, in the community room at the police station. The reason for that is basically the police station is always open, which is so that they were able to accommodate the second and fourth Tuesday hearing schedule. So people will have the opportunity to come in there each night to present their case in a way that they feel comfortable with, and they will have the opportunity to question the inspectors who have issued the complaints. I will have the opportunity to question inspectors. I will have the opportunity to inquire of people. So we're hopeful that this will be a very open-air kind of process. And as you continue to emphasize, it's a quality of life issue, and it does benefit everybody because it takes away the uncertainty of what happens with a ticket after it's gone, after it's issued.
You know, Bob, you mentioned something about evidence, which naturally, if you go to Chelsea District Court as it stands as of yesterday, you'd have to have a reason why you don't think that you should have received this fine. It's going to be a lot different now, and I think, to the extent that the city is doing its due diligence to show that, yes, this really is a real violation, it's being done differently now, where every ticket, I believe, Peter, is going to come with a photo, correct?
That's right.
So maybe you can talk a little about,
Certainly, I think it's a great point that property owners, when they receive a ticket, they need to understand what they're being ticketed for. And here it's going to have a citation to the legal authority, whether it's an ordinance or a code, as to what the person or what's wrong at the property, and it'll have a description as to what was wrong. And then for tickets that are issued with these automated devices, we'll have a picture on the ticket of the reason that the person is getting the ticket to begin with, and then it has an elaborate ticket which explains what they have to do, that they can either pay it or appeal it, and lays out all the various options. So I think it really is something of a great change from the way the city was doing it before and other cities, of just getting a piece of paper and like, hey, the city's charging me $25 or $75 for something they're telling me I did wrong, and I don't even understand what I did wrong. Here they'll have it in writing, they'll have it with a legal citation, and they'll have a photograph of what the city is saying they believe is wrong at the property. So they will know it, they will understand it. If they agree with the city, assume they'll come in and just make the payment, and if they disagree, they'll know what they're fighting about and what to base their appeal on.
So that seems to me like it's going to make Bob's job, I don't want to call it easier, but you're going to be sitting looking at a photograph, right?
It does make easier is exactly the word, because one of the great, I always say that nowhere is the phrase two sides to every coin more illustrated than in a courtroom, because everybody's got their own story. And that will be true to an extent in our hearings as well. But a person who is in violation, let's say they put their trash out and it's strewn all over the sidewalk somehow, this will not be simply an inspector saying, I saw what he saw, and then a property owner saying, nah, that's not how it was. The inspector will have visual evidence of what they observed, and that will be part of the administrative record that I will have prior to hearings. And people will still have an opportunity to explain. There may be situations where there will be valid reasons that a ticket maybe wasn't properly issued, even when that photographic evidence appears clear. But maybe every circumstance has its own little nuance to it. But when someone's not going to be able to simply come up and say, nah, that's not what it was, because there will be photographic evidence of what an inspector observed. So I agree that it makes my job a little bit easier. Perhaps easier is not the right word. Maybe it's more, it's clarified a little bit more, because now that burden does shift to the property owner who is attempting to have that ticket dismissed.
And there are extenuating circumstances, which is probably, for the most part, where you're going to be able, if there are extenuating circumstances, you'll be able to decipher that and then ultimately dismiss the ticket if you find it appropriate. But, I think it's important that the public know, that property owners know that, we don't go out and fine people because we take any joy in it. We don't give parking tickets because we take joy in it. These ordinances are there for a reason. If we weren't to issue parking tickets, as an example, people would be able, maybe people from outside the city, come in, park on our streets, sit there all day, much to the detriment of our local businesses, jump on the bus and go to the train station, and we would become essentially a parking lot for whoever. So, while nobody likes to get a parking ticket, it's important that we have a mechanism to keep traffic flowing and moving. With these ordinances that you both are working on and have worked on, it's to maintain, and I know, Bob, you just said it, the quality of life in neighborhoods.
Well, the greatest illustration of that is where you have a street and you've got 8 homes on that street, and 7 of those 8 homeowners go to every length to maintain their property, and then 1 doesn't, and 1 is careless. 1 property owner just doesn't pay any attention to the property. That has a detrimental effect on those other 7 homeowners, and it's frustrating to those homeowners. And when you're not paying attention, when you're not enforcing the ordinances that should apply to that delinquent property owner, it is demoralizing to the other property owners. And then maybe they don't maintain their property with as much enthusiasm because they figure, what's the use? This hopefully will educate the public. We intend to be fair in the appeal process. And we won't take draconian positions on every time somebody takes an appeal. We will be fair. But when people have a history of violations, that's all going to be part of our record. That's one of the, again, one of the benefits of this new system. If a person, a homeowner, a property owner, starts to accrue a history of violations, and let's say they get away with it once or twice and an appeal is, a violation is dismissed, well, if they become recidivist, then our approach to it will be very different, because now you're seeing someone who is attempting to challenge the system, challenge the enforcement mechanisms that are properly in place.
Right. Well, I know we're winding down. Minute or so, Peter, any final thoughts about your, how you view the process from here on, or what the process has been like? And
I think the process has been great by the city. They've really taken their time and looked at how all the departments, how all its property owners and residents could be affected by this, and made very great and deliberate decisions on how to implement really a first in its kind program. And I think it's going to yield very successful and very fair results for the city and for the property owners, and for those property owners, like Bob said, who are being victimized by maybe banks that have abandoned properties, by illegal rooming houses, and other really bad situations that might be occurring in the city, where people don't feel safe in their property, or their property values are going down. So while this is a system that could deal with simple issues, like maybe trash goes out a little too early, or people are not totally upkeeping with their property, it's also a system that's going to give very strong enforcement to deal with those really problem properties that have been addressed in the Mayor's Safe Housing Task Force as well.
that's great, Bob.
No, I just think that this is a dawn of a new day here in the city, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be part of it. And I think that the citizens of this city are about to experience a very efficient and comprehensive and fair way for the city to implement rules that are designed really to make this a more livable, a more enjoyable city to be part of. So hopefully everybody will join up, and we're not issuing tickets. That people that we have a city that's filled with good properties and good homeowners.
Contrary to what people think, that is our goal, to issue no fines. Believe me, we don't want to issue fines. We want everybody to maintain their property, but the way that we, unfortunately, that's not always the case, which is why we have 40U. But I just want to thank you, Peter, for your work throughout this process. It has been a tedious process, and without your expertise from both you and your team over at Dan Rizzo and Brown, the city would not have been at the stage where we're at right now, for sure. I know Emily, she was extremely helpful. Benny DeCristoforo, Nick Catanazzo, David Krasnoff, the rest of the inspectional services team, George Anzoni from the perspective of finance, even Glenn DeRosa from our IT department, have all been instrumental in getting us to the point that we're at now. And you guys hung in there. It was not always easy. I know I would get my regular updates, and I know that at times it was frustrating. So, really, my hat's off to you, because, as you said, this program in Revere is really, of all the municipalities that have adopted 40U, we are in a class of our own where it's integrated with our finance department. So I think this could be the start of something maybe to spread around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And with respect to you, Bob, I think it was virtually unanimous amongst our group when we started talking about a potential hearings officer to approach you, and because we know that you're going to be fair, but you're going to be tough. And we know that you have that ability, because you're a resident here too, and you want the same thing that we want. We want good, solid, strong, clean neighborhoods. And we of course are gonna try to be fair and understanding, but at the same time, people will have to know that these ordinances are on the books for a reason, and that is to make for better and cleaner neighborhoods. So With that,
Can I just add,
yeah.
I just want to add 2 names to your roster of people who deserve
Please
praise.
do.
And that's Noreen Cristiano and Linda Redding in Inspectional Services, because they are catching the brunt of the implementation.
I'm glad you said that, and the
and-
inspectors that are now doing this.
Absolutely,
So as we wind
absolutely.
down, I just want to thank all of you. I want to thank Peter, Bob, and we look forward to a very successful new program here in the city of Revere with 40U. Thanks.